They were still 5 million kilometers out when the black ship altered their heartbeat rhythms across the board. Not through impact or transmission, but by syncing with the crew's biometric monitors in total silence, as if it had been listening. For them since long before they even arrived. Commander Ellis Hadrian noticed it first, though he said nothing immediately, only stiffened his shoulders slightly where he stood on the bridge. Arms crossed, eyes fixed on the pulsing readouts across the forward console. A man so precise that even his silences had rhythm. His discipline born from 2 decades of off-world engagements, where calm saved lives more often than firepower seated. Behind him, Dr. Lena Corwin glanced toward the data logs as the pulses became clearer, her fingers tightening around the edge of her tablet, her eyes not confused but curious. The kind of curiosity that didn't seek answers right away, but filed everything in mental layers, always dissecting language, meaning, and intent. Because for her, even silence could be a sentence if one learned how to read it. Lieutenant Donovan stood beside the weapons panel, arms folded over a chest that had taken blast impact twice on Europa. A man of few opinions, but strong instincts, trained to suspect the worst and react 2 steps ahead of it. And right now, he was watching the biometric sync logs with growing unease, because for once even his tactical mind couldn't explain what was syncing with him when nothing outside was moving. And at the back of the bridge, Ensign Theo Mallory whispered, mostly to himself, "You, huh? So just checking, are we saying this ship might actually be breathing with us now? Or is that just my nervous system freaking out in sync with alien ghost tech?" His words said with a small grin, the kind of grin that tried to flatten out anxiety, but couldn't hide the way his hands had gone still on the console. The usual fidgeting replaced by held breath. They had found the object drifting beyond Neptune's orbit, stationary yet somehow radiating movement, its silhouette barely reflecting light, but absorbing signal across all deep space bands. A ship, so massive it could blot out the stars behind it without shadow. Its shape geometrically precise, yet deeply wrong in a way. No one could quantify. Hadrian had named it the Black Ship on the record. Not out of drama, but necessity, because calling it a vessel assumed it had once moved with purpose, while the term artifact implied it was dead, and he didn't believe for 1 second that it was anything close to dead. "You'll all see that sync pulse pattern repeating every 12 seconds now," he finally said, not a question, but a confirmation of shared awareness. His voice even calm, clipped in the way that demanded people stay sharper, instead of letting panic take root. And then he added, "Set condition yellow, seal external. Comes and prep the boarding capsule for hard dock." Theo looked up from the readings, blinking like he wasn't sure if that was a joke. "Wait, we're actually boarding this thing today? Like, right now? Are we not even going to send a second drone sweep first? Or maybe talk this over with someone who has, I don't know, maybe an actual death wish?" But even as he said it, he was already pushing himself up from the console, because that was the thing with Theo. He joked through fear, but moved through it too. Corwin had already begun collecting her language scans and neural probes. Her expression unreadable, eyes sharp behind the glasses that had gone foggy from her breath. And Reed just checked the charge on his sidearm, like he always did, not because he planned to use it, but because readiness was the only thing he trusted. Out here where laws didn't apply and logic could be rewritten in seconds, Hadrian tapped the intercom, voice steady as stone. "Team Alpha, you're boarding in 15. Gear up and record every second. No assumptions, no improvisations unless it's survival related. If it moves, don't engage. If it responds, record it. If it predicts, ... We fall back outside the viewport. The black ship remained perfectly still, but the biometric sync deepened, as if its systems were humming in time with their thoughts. And no one said out loud what they were starting to feel, that this ship might not be reacting to them at all, might have been expecting them all along. **. The boarding capsule disengaged from Orion 7 with a soundless shudder. magnetic clamps releasing with a controlled pulse that vibrated through the seats. And for a long moment, none of the four inside said a word, not because of nerves exactly, but because silence felt like the only appropriate response when you were approaching something that had been waiting in the dark longer than human history could comfortably explain. Theo Mallory was strapped into the forward sensor seat, staring at the display feed with a look that hovered somewhere between amazement and denial, his voice finally breaking the quiet as he muttered, "I mean, just putting it out there, but has anyone considered that this thing could be like an alien mausoleum, or worse, a really polite trap?" Then he turned toward Corwin with a grin that didn't quite reach his eyes. "You're the linguist. Does this shape scream welcome to you, or more of a you will not return vibe?" Corwin didn't look up. She was scanning the textures forming along the hull's surface, recording the strange, fractal-like patterns that seemed to change with angle and distance. And after a moment she answered without humor, "It isn't meant to be read visually. It's semiotic architecture, not symbolic. It's speaking in structure, not words, which means we're already inside a form of language, whether we dock or not." Reed sat beside the hatch in full suit, helmet unclasped for now, gaze sharp and shoulders tense, watching every status feed with the controlled awareness of someone who'd learned the hard way not to relax in places humans weren't meant to be. And though he said nothing in response to Theo's jokes, he did shift the charge control of his weapon to manual override, something he never did unless he genuinely believed it might be needed. Commander Hadrian's voice came through the channel, steady and unshaken. "Final approach in 1 minute. Scan integrity is holding. No heat signatures. No electrical pattern that matches known propulsion systems. But there is movement beneath the primary hull, tracking slow, low-frequency rotations." Mallory confirmed visual contact on exterior surface changes. Theo squinted at the screen, hand tightening on the visual zoom. Commander ... Yeah, that would be a yes. I'm seeing panels that are either sliding open or morphing. Hard to tell which because it's not mechanical. It's like the surface is re-knitting itself as we get closer. And UH? It's shaping a docking port, sir, like it wants us to enter. A beat of silence followed, only broken by the slight hum of deceleration. And then Hadrian answered, calm but firm. "Understood. Proceed with docking as planned. Eyes open, minds sharper, record everything. Trust nothing." The capsule attached with a hiss, pressure locks sealing like a mouth closing around them. And Reed moved first, suiting up fully and unlocking the inner hatch, his movements exact and practiced. Always the soldier first, but his breath caught slightly when the ramp lowered and the first waft of interior air brushed his suit, not because of any toxin, but because the air wasn't stale at all. It was warm. Corwin was next, scanning with every tool in her kit, her expression unreadable, noting aloud that the molecular composition of the air was similar to Earth standard oxygen, but infused with microscopic strands of something unknown, something too ordered to be natural, as if it had been woven deliberately into the atmosphere. Theo stepped in last, slowly, his steps echoing into the vast corridor ahead that should have been silent, but instead gave off the faintest low hum. Not sound exactly, more like a vibration that sat behind the eyes and inside the chest. And he whispered, "I swear this place feels like a cathedral built by something that never prayed." Reed glanced back once, voice clipped. "Don't talk like that in here." But even he couldn't stop glancing upward as the corridor lights blinked on before their steps landed, illuminating just far enough ahead to invite them forward. Corwin pointed to a glowing band in the floor, its light pulsing in rhythmic waves. "It's leading us, but not randomly. It's reading us. Each step refines the path based on how we respond. This isn't just architecture. This is cognitive mapping." Theo frowned slightly and said, "So basically ... This hallway knows me better the more I walk it? And then laughed once under his breath. Great. Now even the walls have a file on me. But his voice was soft now, the joke thinner, because even he was starting to feel it, the undeniable sensation that something in this ship wasn't just aware of them, it was curious too. The corridor funneled them downward, not in any direction that matched standard ship design, but in a slow spiral, each curve of the passageway too perfectly measured to be organic and too subtly shifting to be mechanical. And the deeper they went, the more it felt like the ship was subtly adjusting itself around their presence, not to guide them exactly, but to shape the experience they were having. Reed kept glancing at corners that didn't exist until he looked twice. Shadows folding away from where there were no clear light sources. And although his weapon remained secured, his hand never left the grip, eyes darting between movement and silence. And when he finally spoke, it was barely more than a growl. I've seen structures that adapt before, but this feels like it's learning us in real time. And I don't like how fast it's picking things up. Corwin nodded slowly, running her fingers across the surface of one gently rippling wall, the texture feeling more like fluid held in tension than any material she had ever encountered, her breath catching slightly as the wall pulsed in perfect rhythm with her touch, and she whispered, "It's not just environmental control, it's reflective behavior. It's waiting for patterns. It recognizes, like it was designed to host something, but doesn't quite know if that's us yet." Theo had gone quiet for a full 5 minutes, which was unusual for him in any context, and when he did speak again, his voice was slower, less playful. "I was going to say this feels like walking through the nervous system of a sleeping god, but that would actually be comforting compared to this, because at least gods come with myths. This just feels like invention without explanation." They emerged into a central chamber without warning, the corridor flaring into an immense dome, where the walls curved up, and then in, not to a ceiling, but to a sphere of floating light suspended in total stillness. At the center, surrounded by a circle of raised pedestals, and at the far end of the room, a structure rose from the floor, a wide, rectangular monolith that didn't match the ship's material or architecture, darker than the shadows around. It enwrapped in shifting symbols that moved in and out of view like breath patterns. Corwin stepped forward first, eyes wide, scanning everything at once, her voice hushed but firm. This wasn't built into the ship. It was placed here, maybe even grown, but deliberately, like it's the nucleus of whatever this ship is doing. This is what it's all designed around. Theo followed close behind, staring up at the monolith with a kind of fascination that had no room left for fear, only a stubborn awe. That's not metal. That's not even tech in the way we define it. It's more like memory that forgot what it used to be, but still wants to be remembered. Reed stood back near the entrance, posture stiff, scanning every angle, every line of movement on the readouts, and when he saw the flicker in the symbols, a brief but clear shift into Earth-standard phonetic structures, he snapped, "Back away from that thing right now. Do not touch it. I don't care how interesting it looks. This could be a trigger for something we can't shut down." But Corwin raised her hand slowly, pointing to the symbols, which were now translating. Without any interface, no device, just shimmering glyphs resolving into readable words. And in the middle of the black slab, a line formed clearly enough for all three of them to read in silence. "The one who speaks last will not speak again." For a moment, no one moved. Theo blinked, then cleared his throat awkwardly. "Well, great. I guess I'll just, stay quiet and let my career survive a little longer. Thanks, Space Prophecy." But his voice cracked slightly, and when he looked at the Codex again, the symbols were already changing. The monolith pulsed once, softly like a breath being drawn, and then a new sequence began to appear, one glyph at a time, building out a complex phrase, not just language now, but timestamp, location, Sequence Marcus Corwin gasped quietly and stepped forward. Wait. This is predictive formatting. This isn't a warning. It's an update. It's not reacting to us. It's recording in real time, as if it's seeing ahead and logging what will happen before it happens. Theo looked at her slowly, his voice lower now, serious in a way that erased his usual humor. Are you saying this thing is writing the future right now, as we're standing here? And Corwin nodded once without turning around, her voice almost flat. No. I think it's rewriting it. Asterisk for almost 20 seconds. No one spoke. No one moved. No one even shifted weight, as if the air itself had thickened in response to the Codex revealing its first full prediction. And when it finally stopped pulsing, what remained was a line neither ancient nor futuristic, but eerily present, a timestamp formatted in Earth's own UTC down to the second, matching the following day, and beside it, one word. Event Reed stepped forward now, slowly, deliberately, keeping one eye on the Codex as if it might lunge, even though it hadn't moved a millimeter since they entered, and he spoke in a voice laced with control, but tightening at the edges. Event ... Is that all it says? No location, no description, just that something's going to happen? On our clock? Corwin was already running simultaneous language scans across 3 devices, trying to detect any residual encoding that could give context. And her voice was tense now too, more than it had been since the start. The Codex doesn't need more detail because it assumes you understand it. This isn't communication. It's command line logic, as if it's interfacing with the future the way a system. Reed scheduled operations. Theo took a slow step backward from the monolith. Eyes wide now, voice quieter than before. That doesn't make sense, Lena. You're saying it's scheduling reality? Like tomorrow at 9:42 UTC, something just happens because this thing said so? And then added more to himself than to them. God, this is worse than time travel. This is like fate written in alien operating systems. Reed scanned the timestamp again, then tapped the internal log, pulling crew status data, and his jaw tightened the second he saw what it matched. A crew identification string embedded in the log beneath the timestamp, one belonging to him, and only him. No, he muttered, more to himself than anyone else. That's my call tag. My bio ID, down to the registration hash. And when Corwin confirmed it with a nod, he turned sharply toward Hadrian's voice over the channel. Commander, the Codex is targeting personnel data. I repeat, it's assigning timestamps to individual crew members and listing them as part of a future event, with no description of what the event is. There was a brief pause on the line, but when Hadrian responded, his voice didn't waver. Understood, Lieutenant. Log every detail and prepare for fallback extraction. If it's targeting our crew, this is no longer a passive survey. It's an engagement protocol. Move clean and stay alert. Theo didn't like how quiet Corwin had gone all of a sudden, how she was now staring at the Codex without blinking. And when he reached forward to lightly touch her shoulder, she flinched as if waking from a trance, then whispered, "It's still changing. Not all at once, but beneath the surface, the glyphs are cycling like background code, adjusting their structure every time we speak or move." Reed looked around the chamber quickly now, noting how the walls had subtly reformed into tighter arcs, pulling closer, the light dimming just slightly. Not enough to feel threatening, but enough to notice that the exit behind them no longer looked exactly the way it had when they entered. "We're not alone in here," he said quietly, tapping a command to initiate structural scans. "The geometry's folding around us. It's alive, adaptive, not just watching us, but modeling us." Theo turned slowly back toward the Codex, eyes narrowing, the tension finally pushing him out of humor completely, and he said in a tone flatter than usual, "You don't think it's predicting Reed's death, do you? I mean, ... event doesn't have to mean anything violent, right?" Maybe it's a sneeze, or a sudden craving for pancakes. Something harmless. Could be harmless, but even he didn't believe that the Codex pulsed again, one soft vibration across the floor, and then the text shifted again, this time faster, displaying a sequence of 3 more tags, including Corwin's, and Theus Corwin read them aloud in a whisper that sounded like it was being pulled out of her, not spoken willingly. 3 more names, 3 more timestamps, all within the next 36 hours. This isn't a warning system. It's a countdown cue. Reed stepped between them and the Codex now, blocking it from view as if the act alone might shield them from it. And his voice dropped low and firm. We are not reading another line of that thing unless authorized. Do you understand me? Both of you. This is no longer an investigation. This is containment. And behind them, as they turned to retrace their steps, the door they had come through was no longer open. It wasn't sealed shut. It was simply gone. Reed didn't panic, at least not on the surface. He simply turned a slow circle and scanned the perimeter with the cold precision of someone trained to survive in systems that broke rules. His voice tight as steel when he said, "There was a door here. There was a hallway. We walked through it 42 minutes ago on recorded entry feed. And now it doesn't exist. It's not closed. It's erased." Corwin didn't argue. She simply rechecked her scanner twice, once manually and once through her headset lens, both confirming the same impossibility. Solid surface where there had been nothing but empty air and passage before. No break lines, no mechanical shift, just a continuous wall that hadn't been there when they walked in. Theo exhaled a soft breath and muttered, "You know, I once failed an architecture class for saying buildings could evolve like organisms. But right now, I'd really like to call my professor and say I was only early. Not wrong." Then he stepped back and looked at Corwin, voice low and serious. "Can it manipulate reality like this just because we're inside it? Or ... are we inside something that was never stable to begin with?" Corwin didn't answer right away, because she was too busy watching the way the walls weren't just present now. They were breathing, very faintly, each panel expanding and contracting in the slow rhythm of something alive. And when she finally spoke, it was barely a whisper. "I think it's reconfiguring its environment to match its expectations, not our presence. We're not guests here. We're variables in its model." Reed took 2 steps forward and placed a hand on the surface where the exit should have been, his fingers pressing against a wall that wasn't cold like metal or warm like flesh, but something in between, like stone that had memory, and when it didn't respond to touch. He drew his hand back slowly and said, "Fallback protocols compromised. We're shifting to live containment mapping. No more unsanctioned contact with the Codex. No readings without a full scan pass first. And if anyone touches anything without confirmation, I'm dragging them back to the capsule unconscious." Theo didn't argue, but he was still staring at the Codex, something in his eyes, not exactly fear, not exactly wonder either, but that deep space expression that happened when a human started realizing they were staring at something that wasn't just alien, but superior. Corwin pulled up the ship logs, comparing timestamps, and then froze, her hand hovering over the screen, face suddenly pale under the helmet light, and she said quietly, "The Codex has inserted itself into our logs. These weren't written by us." Reed turned fast. "Explain that." Corwin angled the screen toward them. On it was a line-by-line mission record that matched their entire entry sequence into the chamber, step by step, phrase by phrase, down to Theo's jokes and Reed's orders. But at the bottom, the final 2 lines had not yet occurred. The first read, 1704. Theo Mallory initiates unscheduled contact with Codex. And the second, 1706. Entry signal transmitted. Theo blinked, looked at his watch, then up at the clock on Corwin's reader, and his voice went very small. "It's 1702 right now. Reed didn't wait. He moved between Theo and the Codex, fast enough to knock over one of the sensor pods. Voice loud and hard. "Back away from it. Now, I said no one touches it, and I meant it. This thing is either reading future memory or writing it, and we're not going to be the crew that proves it right by walking into its hands." Theo raised both hands, palms out. All right, no touching, no staring too hard, no jokes unless they're safety approved. Message received, I'm backing up, seriously." And he did, step by careful step, until he was back beside Corwin. Again, the Codex didn't pulse again. Not visibly, not like before, but somewhere inside the floor, something moved. A low vibration swept through the chamber, too deep to be sound, more like pressure against the ribs, and every light in the dome flickered once, as if a larger system had acknowledged them. Corwin turned toward Red slowly, voice sharper now. "It's reacting to timelines, not decisions, not language, but time itself. It predicted Theo's move before he made it, and that signal line. That's going to happen unless we change something now." Reed's eyes narrowed. "You want to test that theory?" Theo looked at them both and said, almost too calmly, "Guys, I think the Codex just wants us to know it's already told. Someone were here, and at 1706 exactly, Orion 7's long-range signal dish rotated 6 degrees on its own and fired a burst transmission deep into a direction no one on Earth had ever pointed a message before asterisk. The signal wasn't on any known frequency, and it wasn't initiated by Orion 7's crew. Yet the ship's logs showed it as internally authorized, flagged under a clearance code that didn't exist in their database. And when Commander Hadrian reviewed the footage, he saw it. Dish had moved before the signal fired, not as a result of a command, but as if obeying something already embedded in its operating core. No alarms had triggered, no warnings had sounded, and yet the message was real, and it had been sent inside the chamber. Corwin's breath caught in her throat when her scanner lit up in response, showing a trail of energy moving up through the Codex and then out through the floor, tracing toward the upper hull of the black ship. And she said, voice hollow, "It used us as a relay. The Codex didn't just log future events. It wrote a command and fired it through our own systems." Reed stepped back, pacing tightly now, checking his helmet for emergency seal protocols, the sharp angle of his jaw tight. "Enough to crack. How does it even have access to our ship's hardware, Lena? We've got 4 layers of firewalls between this chamber and our comms array." Theo had gone still, unusually still, his voice lower than before, thoughtful in a way that felt heavier than fear. "Unless the Codex isn't just interacting with us biologically or linguistically ... Maybe it interfaces with anything that processes information, including systems, logic trees, security locks, and maybe the moment we read it, that was enough." Corwin didn't look away from the Codex, her eyes reflecting its symbols. As they shifted again, slower this time, deeper somehow, as if the first layer had passed and now a second one was unfolding, and she spoke in a near whisper, "I don't think it's malware. I think it's literacy, on a scale we don't understand, and our systems are simple enough for it to speak through like paper speaks through ink." Outside, Commander Hadrian was already shifting the bridge crew into combat isolation mode, ordering hard-coded overrides of navigation controls. But the strange part was, nothing was resisting. The ship wasn't fighting back, because the Codex didn't need to control them. It had already gotten what it wanted. Theo finally turned and looked at both of them, his face pale now, his usual humor completely gone. And he said slowly, "If the Codex knew our names, our actions, and even our timestamps, then maybe the signal wasn't a reaction to us being here. Maybe it's why we were sent here in the first place." Reed stared at him, then Corwin, then back to the sealed wall behind them. The room colder now, not in temperature but in atmosphere. Something in the way the light had shifted. More sterile, less curious, and said flatly, "You think we're part of its script, that we didn't find the ship by accident, that we were brought here to activate it." Corwin nodded once, her expression grim. It needed a key, not a signal, a species with just enough structure to decode it, just enough curiosity to touch it, and just enough arrogance to believe we were in control once we did. They all looked at the Codex together. The monolith as silent and unmoving as before, and yet everything inside the room felt like it had changed, like an ancient circuit had closed after centuries of waiting, and now something else was watching them from within it. Theo broke the silence with a voice barely above a breath. So ... What now? And then, without light, without fanfare, the Codex began forming a new line. But this time, the sentence was personal. It showed only one thing, a name, Theo Mallory, no timestamp, no description, just his name, pulsing slowly as if the Codex had finally chosen to speak directly to someone and was waiting for him to answer. Theo didn't say a word at first. He just stared at the glowing line on the Codex, watching the way his name hovered there, still and waiting, pulsing not like a machine signal, but like breath held in a chest too long. And it wasn't just the presence of his name that unsettled him. It was the expectation behind it, like the Codex wasn't alerting him to danger, but calling him forward, the way someone might summon a memory that hadn't happened. Yet Reed moved fast, stepping between Theo and the Codex again, his hand already on the magnetic charge latch of his weapon. Voice hard. "No one moves. No one speaks to it. I don't care if it writes your birthday in cursive. We treat it like hostile tech until we know otherwise. This isn't a conversation. It's a breach protocol." Theo blinked, then let out a sound halfway between a laugh and a breath, rubbing the back of his neck. I appreciate the protectiveness, but it already sent a message using our ship as a mailbox. Reed, I think we're past the line of keeping this thing at gunpoint." Corwin stepped closer, eyes flicking across the symbols again, scanning the new patterns forming under Theo's name, and adjusting her visual overlay to layer time intervals over the text flow. And her voice had dropped into that quiet analytical register she used when things were too strange to explain quickly. "It's not just calling him, it's mapping him. Look here, under the name, this isn't just language. These are behavioral curves, emotional logic patterns. It's writing how he will respond, not asking what he wants." Theo turned slowly toward her, smile gone now, and said, more seriously than he ever had before, "You're saying it's reading my mind?" Corwin shook her head. "Worse. It's predicting your thought process. Like a script, it's already written. And it's waiting for you to say the next line because it's confident. It already knows what it's going to be." Reed didn't like any of it, especially the way the Codex remained perfectly still while the room around it began to tilt. Not physically, but perceptually, the walls warping slightly at the edges of their vision, like reality was bending around a center that had just shifted from the Codex to Theo. "You don't talk to it, Mallory," he said again, firmer, stepping closer. "I'm not playing guessing games with something that turns ships into transmitters and hallways into traps." But Theo didn't move toward the Codex, and he didn't talk to it either. Instead, he knelt down slowly, placing one hand flat against the floor near the base of the monolith, not touching it, but close enough to feel the low pulse beneath his palm. And when he spoke, his voice was quiet, level, and not meant for Reed or Corwin. "If this thing knows me so well, then maybe it already knows I'm not interested in doing what it wants." For a moment, nothing happened. Then the Codex pulsed once and every light in the chamber went out pitch black, swallowed them whole for exactly 3 seconds. Then the lights returned, but now the walls were covered in new lines of glyphs, running across every visible surface, not in the Codex's neutral symbol language, but in Earth standard characters, arranged in rows, spiraling around them, and all showing The same sentence repeated over and over. The one who resists becomes the one remembered. Reed raised his weapon. Backing Theo away without a word, Corwin turned her scanner in a full 360 sweep and said flatly, "It's recontextualizing him, assigning narrative value to resistance, like it wants to document deviation, like it's studying choice." Theo looked up at the glowing lines that now filled the room like scripture and said quietly, "So it doesn't care what we do, ... It just wants to record how we do it." And Reed, watching the symbols shift again in real time, muttered darkly under his breath, "Then that means none of this is a trap or a test. It's a story." Asterisk, the word story didn't sit right with Reed, not because it wasn't accurate, but because it sounded too harmless. A story implied structure, a beginning, middle, and end. But everything in this ship, the Codex, the shifting walls, the time-stamped logs, suggested something else entirely. Not a story with a destination. A loop, a design that rewrote itself every time someone tried to break. I've kept his weapon low but active, watching the lines spiral across the walls. They were written in every language Theo's translator had ever been trained on. Earth Standard English, older dialects, binary, even military brevity codes from systems not yet public, and all of them said the same thing in different variations. The observer changes the path by being observed. Deviation enhances the record. Narrative integrity, maintained by variance. Corwin backed up until their shoulder hit the curved wall, not out of fear but calculation. She was watching the rhythm of the sentences as if they weren't just words but pulses, like notes in a musical pattern that hadn't finished composing itself. "It's documenting our divergence," she said softly. "The more we act out of sync with its prediction, the more it ... adapts, not by resisting, by incorporating the deviation into the structure. That's not artificial intelligence. That's authored cognition." Theo was seated now, arms on his knees, head tilted up toward the symbols looping across the ceiling. His voice was calm, too. Calm. "So let me get this straight. If I ignore it, it writes me in. If I argue, it writes me louder. If I try to escape, it closes the door but adds my panic to the plot. It's not watching us to stop us. It's watching us to learn how we think under pressure." Reed didn't respond. He was scanning for thermal shifts, anything to indicate that something other than text was forming. But there was nothing. Number. Sound. No change in pressure. Only the steady rewrite of space around them, as if the ship was turning into a diary, and they were the pen. Codex itself hadn't changed position, still rooted at the center of the room, still silent. But now there was a new layer. A second panel had emerged beside it, smaller and tilted slightly toward Theo's last known position. It wasn't just a monolith now. It was an interface with a branching split, one side still covered in shifting glyphs, the other now displaying options. Corwin stepped closer, narrowing her eyes at the layout. "It's presenting him with choices. Look, these aren't predictions. These are proposed entries. It's asking Theo to select a path." Theo raised an eyebrow, a humorless edge in his voice. "Like a choose-your-own-apocalypse book?" He stood slowly and approached, careful not to get too close. "What happens if I don't choose?" Reed said nothing. He was already checking the backup capsule logs. Orion 7 was receiving feedback signals now, signals it had not asked for. Return pings embedded in the outgoing burst the Codex had sent. Pings that didn't originate from any known coordinate, but were definitely coming back. Corwin answered quietly, "I don't think the Codex needs you to choose. I think it's giving you the illusion of it, to see how long you resist before surrendering. Because every second you hesitate is another data point." Theo turned to Reed and said, "I'm not picking anything. Not yet. Let it watch. Let it log me blank. Let's see what it does when the variable won't move." Reed nodded, just once, and muttered, "Good. Let it fail to predict. Let it feel what uncertainty looks like in real time." And at that moment, the Codex dimmed slightly, just one pulse lower, as if pausing or thinking. Then from the newly split panel, a second. Message formed. A single sentence, smaller than before. Just 3 words. "Someone is coming," Reed looked up sharply. "That's not a record." Corwin stared at the timestamp forming below the sentence. It matched a time just hours ahead, and Theo, with a strange calm settling over him, whispered what they were all thinking, but didn't want to say out loud. It didn't warn us this time. It told us. They didn't speak for a full minute after the Codex revealed the message. The words "someone is coming" hung in the air like a static charge, one that didn't dissipate but kept building pressure around them, subtle and invisible. The kind you only noticed when your ears began to ring and your pulse no longer matched your breath. Reed was the first to move, finally turning away from the Codex and activating the emergency comlink back to Orion 7. "Bridge, this is Alpha. Team, confirm exterior scan status. Scan the region 50,000 clicks out and expanding. Look for any inbound trajectory, non-reflective mass, or long-range distortion. Anything. Do not wait for second pass. Call it if you even think something is moving." But the bridge responded with a hesitation that didn't belong to trained officers. "Commander, we single quotes reading something. Intermittent gravimetric flux, just outside the outer band of Saturn's orbit. Too smooth to be debris, too dispersed for standard drive wake. It's not moving toward us yet, but the distortion is growing." Corwin's hands clenched at her sides, not in fear, but in frustration. The kind that comes when a pattern finally completes, and it's worse than expected. "The Codex didn't just call for contact," she said slowly. "It called for observation. It wanted us to read it before the arrival. The message wasn't just a ping. It was a beacon, a situational marker that confirmed we're ready." Theo stared at the panel where the sentence still pulsed. "Someone is coming." No coordinates, no species, no intention. Just certainty. And when he spoke again, there was no joking left in his voice. "We're the confirmation, aren't we? The Codex didn't just predict contact, ... triggered it. We were the final variable." Reed glanced at Corwin, then at Theo, then back at the walls now cycling through silent lines of unreadable script. "No," he said flatly. "We were the proof of concept." Suddenly, the ship's structure shifted again, not with sound, not with tremor, but with gravity. A subtle lurch downward, like the sensation of an elevator descending faster than expected. The Codex remained in place, but the walls pulled back. They didn't vanish. They simply withdrew, revealing a much larger chamber beneath an observation hall. No lights activated. The room glowed dimly from some unknown source above, and across the far wall, projected in shimmering, fractured reflections, was a display. A shape, still distant, still faint, but definitely moving. Corwin stepped forward instinctively. "That's a vessel," she whispered. "No heat trail, no propulsion flare, but the gravitational displacement is deliberate. It's not drifting. It's flying under silence." Reed activated the targeting overlay, even though he knew it would do nothing. "Size? Comparable to ours, maybe a bit larger. But it's folded. The outer hull is overlapping its own mass. That's not engineering. That's conceptual manipulation." Theo tilted his head slightly, squinting. "It's not a ship. It's a reflection. A concept that shaped itself like us, because we were the most recent idea in the Codex." Reed snapped back toward the Codex, weapon now raised. "How do we stop it?" Corwin didn't answer. Theo did. "You don't. Because it's not an invasion. It's an arrival. And we're the welcoming party. and then the Codex pulsed once more. Only this time, it displayed no words, just an image, a human figure unlabeled, undefined, but with Theo's stance, Theo's features, and eyes that were still adjusting. As if even he hadn't realized what he was about to become, the image on the Codex didn't move. It just remained there, suspended in impossible stillness, like a thought held in someone else's mind. The figure was unmistakably human. Same proportions, same posture, same narrow build as Theo. But there was something wrong with the eyes. They weren't lifeless. They weren't glowing. They weren't monstrous. They were just unfinished, like the Codex had captured him mid-transition, still building its version of him, still trying to decide whether he was going to be a warning, a message, or something much harder to define. Theo stared at the image for several long seconds. Before he finally spoke, voice dry, almost mechanical in its calm. "That's not me. That's what it thinks I could be." Reed stepped closer, eyes locked on the Codex, weapon lowered but ready. "Or what it's trying to make you into." Corwin scanned the projection again. "It's not a static visual. Look at the pattern around the shoulders. That's movement data. It's compiling predictions of his next actions. Not as surveillance. As design input." Theo stepped away from the Codex now, slow and steady, his body tense, but his voice steady. "It's using me as a blueprint, not just for communication, for representation. If something's coming, and it doesn't know what we are ... it's going to show them me." Silence settled thick in the chamber outside the ship. The contact object had moved closer. Still silent, still undetectable by standard channels. But Orion 7 had begun receiving indirect radiation bleed. No active signal, just heat shadows. As if something big was moving in between dimensions, and reality itself was trying to make Room Commander Hadrian's voice cracked through the channel. "Team, this is the bridge. We're receiving incoming data from the object. It's not in language. It's not in waveform. It's visual. It's you, Mallory. It's a live feed copy of you, standing still, inside a space none of our sensors can identify. And it's looking back." Theo's knees nearly gave. He pressed one hand to the wall, breathing slow and shaky now, voice lower. "It's already sent me ahead ... NASA template. That thing out there, whatever it is, it sees me before I ever saw it." Reed turned toward the Codex, then shut it down. "Power it off. Cut the feeds. Pull every link between this room and the bridge, before that thing decides it wants more than a silhouette." But Corwin didn't move. She was staring at a new set of glyphs forming just above the figure. Her voice was thin and uncertain now. "It's too late. The Codex isn't transmitting anymore. It's listening." Theo looked up. His reflection on the monolith changed. It smiled, not in a cruel way, not in a human way either. Just a slight, impossible shift of expression. Acknowledgement, completion, and then the chamber lights dimmed again. This time for good. In the dark, one final line appeared on the Codex The story begins, and far beyond the black ship, just past the edge of where known space ends, something answered back, a signal clear, cold, and human-shaped.